Imagine a nation that, for decades, basically survived by exporting its own people to build other countries.
Right, relying almost entirely on human labor.
Exactly. But now, imagine that same nation suddenly deciding to, well, export the power of its rivers instead.
It is a massive pivot.
It really is. Welcome to the Nepali Diaspora Network podcast, your source for news, views, and insights for Nepalese worldwide. Today, we are jumping into a brand new deep dive.
And we're pulling this directly from the latest Nepali Diaspora Digest from late July 2026.
Yeah, and the mission for this deep dive is to synthesize what I can only call a week of massive, almost whiplash-inducing contrasts for Nepal.
Whiplash is definitely the right word for it.
Right. I mean, we are looking at record-breaking economic shifts, some highly dramatic political theater, and these incredible grassroots movements that are, forcing historic changes at the very top.
Yeah, this stack of sources perfectly captures a nation caught right between its past and its future. On one hand, you have that traditional economic engine.
The human labor.
Exactly. But on the other hand, you have this emerging economic model that, well, it looks increasingly like a regional powerhouse in renewable energy. We are watching a huge structural shift happen right now.
Let's actually start with that shift because, man, the numbers are stark. For the first time in 3 years, the number of Nepalese citizens taking labor permits to work abroad dropped below 800,000.
Which is a significant milestone.
Yeah, it went down to about 5.5%, landing at 792,187. And while the UAE remains the absolute top destination, there's a really notable shift in the data. Workers are increasingly holding out for European countries.
Right. They aren't just looking for temporary wages anymore.
No, they want permanent residency. But while the export of labor is dipping, the export of power is just exploding.
It really is.
Electricity exports to India and Bangladesh just hit an all-time record. I mean, surging by nearly 70% to cross 29.32 billion rupees.
And that surge created a net trade surplus in electricity of almost 18.76 billion rupees. Yeah, they are selling power at over 7.5 rupees per unit. And the really crucial part here is that India just agreed to raise the export capacity on the Talka-Bar cross-border lines.
To 1,650 megawatts, right?
Exactly.
I want to just pause on the mechanics of that because, to me, it feels like a country completely flipping its economic script, like a business changing its main product.
That's a good analogy.
For decades, Nepal sent its people abroad to send cash back. Now, they are literally harnessing the power of their monsoon rivers.
Yeah.
So how did this transition actually happen on the ground?
Well, it really comes down to how Nepal has developed its hydropower infrastructure, specifically these run-of-the-river dams.
Okay, run-of-the-river.
Yeah, these projects capitalize heavily on the immense volume of water during the monsoon season, but historically, a lot of that wet season surplus power was just wasted.
Because they couldn't store it?
Well, the domestic grid couldn't use it all, and the transmission lines to export it just didn't have the capacity. So negotiating that 2,650 megawatt capacity on the Talka-Bar lines, that's the critical mechanism. It allows Nepal to actually monetize that surplus before the rivers slow down during the dry season.
I see. That makes total sense. But I do have a question about the broader economy. What happens if the human labor export drops too fast before the hydropower money fully ramps up?
Ah, that is the danger zone.
Right, because when millions of Nepalese workers send cash home from the Gulf or Malaysia, what exactly does that do for the country's financial math?
We call that remittance arithmetic.
Remittance arithmetic, okay.
Right, that foreign currency sent home by workers, that's what the central bank uses to buy imports, everything from fuel to medicine to, heavy machinery.
Pays the bills.
Exactly. And it's also the primary tool used to stabilize the value of the rupee and maintain foreign reserves.
Oh, wow. So if that tap turns off too fast,
the economic math breaks down. And that is exactly why this energy transition is so critical. Selling electricity is this foundational shift that generates revenue from domestic natural resources. It's completely independent of human remittances.
Okay, but wait. This actually brings up something that doesn't make sense to me.
What's that?
You're painting a picture of an economy that is finally unlocking its geographic potential, right? Generating massive revenue from rivers. And on top of that, our sources mention that banks have record liquidity right now.
They do, yes.
So if I'm a foreign investor, I'm usually running toward those exact signals. But they're pulling their money out. The data shows foreign direct investment commitments actually shrank by about 7 billion rupees.
Yeah, landing around 58.01 billion across roughly 1,100 projects.
And the tech bets being made are mostly low value. So why is foreign money staying away from a booming energy market with flush banks.
Well, because of the political theater happening in the background.
The drama.
Exactly. Record liquidity simply means deposits are piling up in the banks, but people and businesses aren't actually borrowing that money to grow. Investors, they love a good macroeconomic balance sheet, but they are terrified of unpredictability.
I see. It's like finding a restaurant with a brilliant menu and top-notch ingredients, but when you look in the kitchen, the chefs are throwing pots and pans at each other. You just keep walking.
That is the perfect way to look at it. And the most glaring example of that noise in the kitchen from our sources this week is the Bishnu Paudel case.
Oh, right, the finance minister.
Right, he's an 8-time finance minister who was dramatically arrested and charged with money laundering. He was allegedly concealing assets for a businessman named Deepak Bada.
And we should be very clear for you listening. We are not taking sides on the politics of this arrest at all.
No, absolutely not.
Our sources reflect two very distinct, highly charged narratives here. Supporters of the government view these charges as, necessary, aggressive anti-corruption work to clean up the system.
Right, while supporters of the opposition and Paudel's party are calling it a targeted political vendetta to eliminate rivals.
We're just reporting what the sources say. But getting back to the investor side, how does this specifically scare them off?
Well, the competing narratives are intense, sure, but for a foreign investor watching from the outside, the politics matter less than the timeline of the legal process itself.
Okay, break that down.
Paudel spent 25 days in custody. He was formally charged and then released on the exact same day by the special court.
The same day?
The exact same day. Furthermore, he was released on general bail, which means zero deposit. The court ruled that the evidence presented simply did not establish his connection to the alleged offenses.
So wait, you hold a former finance minister for nearly a month, only for a court to essentially say, the evidence isn't there, and let him walk without even posting bail.
Yes, and that is the mechanism of unpredictability I was talking about.
Right.
When a case against a high-profile figure culminates in a zero-deposit bail because a court finds the evidence lacking, it signals to the market that the legal environment is arbitrary.
It's unpredictable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you are a foreign capital firm or, a diaspora investor weighing a multi-million-dollar infrastructure project back home, that volatility makes you incredibly skittish.
Because you can't risk your capital in a system where the rules change on a whim.
Or where legal actions might be driven by the political winds rather than solid evidence.
Wow. And, that fear of instability makes even more sense when you realize it's not just about one arbitrary court case. The actual fundamental rules of the country are on the chopping block right now.
They really are.
While that whole Paudel drama was unfolding, a government task force submitted a 500-page report to Prime Minister Balendra Shah proposing a complete rewrite of the Constitution.
A massive rewrite. They're proposing amendments to 245 out of the Constitution's 308 articles.
Which is, that scale is hard to even wrap your head around.
Okay.
It's like renovating a house by knocking down 80% of the walls while people are still living inside.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. You still have to keep everyday governance running while you dismantle and replace the foundational operating system.
So what are the actual changes they want to make?
The proposed changes would entirely alter how political power is distributed. We're looking at proposals for a directly elected executive president, a smaller parliament, and a total rethink of how federalism operates in the country. A directly elected president would theoretically prevent the constant rapid collapse of coalition governments that Nepal is known for.
Right, bringing some stability.
But it also centralizes a massive amount of power in one single office.
And crucially for you, the listener tuning in from abroad, this report formally proposes voting rights for Nepalese citizens living overseas.
This is huge. Up until now, the roughly 3 million Nepalese living abroad have been the economic engine of the country through their remittances.
But they've been totally politically sidelined.
Exactly. They pay the bills, but they have no say in how the house is run.
So if overseas voting actually passes, it completely rewrites the electoral math of the entire nation, doesn't it?
It does. It transforms the diaspora from being just passive economic contributors into direct, powerful political stakeholders.
They would finally have a voice in the policies that affect the families they're supporting back home. That's incredible. But will it actually pass?
The challenge is getting this 500-page report anywhere near the finish line.
I can imagine.
Consensus is practically non-existent. 3 political parties have already walked out of the process entirely.
Just walked away.
Yep. Amending the Constitution requires a 2/3 majority in Parliament. And right now, the legislature is so deeply fractured that they've actually adjourned Parliament until July 30th, which is Shravan 14 in the Nepali calendar.
Just to buy time.
Just to give everyone time to digest the document before the real battles begin. It is currently just a discussion paper, not a draft bill, but it sets the stage for the defining political fight of this government's term.
Man, while politicians are debating these lofty constitutional rewrites in the halls of power, everyday citizens are literally walking across the country to force the government to fix the systems squeezing them right now.
The grassroots reckoning.
Yes. This brings us to this massive reckoning happening right at the intersection of migration and predatory debt.
The government was actually forced to act on the manpower agencies this week.
What did they do?
They stopped renewing the licenses for any recruitment agency that has unresolved complaints against them.
Which seems fair, but what's the scale of the complaints?
The backlog is staggering. There are 44,000 complaints pending.
44,000.
Yeah, covering inflated fees, fake job contracts, unpaid wages. And some of these complaints date all the way back to the year 2000.
Oh my gosh. But, recruiters are arguing really loudly right now that this blanket suspension punishes the good agencies along with the bad. Doesn't shutting down the whole pipeline hurt the very workers who are desperately trying to leave for better opportunities?
Well, to understand why the government used a blanket rule, you have to look at the tragic, cyclical pattern connecting the manpower agencies to another massive event from this week's sources.
March for Justice.
Exactly. Hundreds of victims of loan sharks walked for days from Janakpur all the way to Kathmandu. These two stories, the agencies and the loan sharks, they are part of the exact same mechanism of exploitation.
Okay, walk me through how those two connect, because we talked earlier about banks having record liquidity, right? There's plenty of cash in the formal system.
There is cash, yes, but poor rural families are entirely shut out of accessing it because of strict collateral rules and red tape.
They can't just walk into a bank.
Right. So when a family faces a medical emergency or needs money to pay a recruiter to send a family member abroad for work, they cannot go to a formal bank. They are forced to turn to informal loan sharks.
Yeah.
A practice locally known as meter bayage because the interest compounds at an aggressive, almost daily rate.
So they take a small loan, and the interest balloons so fast they end up losing their land.
And once they are trapped in that ruinous debt, the only way to pay off the exploding interest is to migrate for work.
Oh, I see.
That desperation forces them right into the hands of the most exploitative manpower agencies. It's a vicious cycle.
You borrow from a predator to pay an exploiter.
Exactly. And then you send your remittance money home just to cover the interest, never actually touching the principal loan.
That is just brutal. But that makes total sense why the government suspending the agencies and dealing with the loan sharks is a dual-pronged attack on the same cycle.
Oh.
So how did the march from Janakpur end?
Well, the marchers actually secured a historic 9-point deal with the government.
Wow, really?
Yeah, loan sharking is officially going to be declared an economic crime. The government committed to drafting a new predatory lending crime control act within 3 months.
That's incredibly fast for legislation.
It is, and it will specifically criminalize 14 different abusive lending practices. They walked across the country to force the system to protect them, and they walked away with a timeline in writing.
That is powerful. Despite all these heavy domestic bottlenecks, from the constitutional gridlock to this predatory debt, the physical and cultural barriers between Nepal and the rest of the globe are actually dropping incredibly fast.
We are seeing a massive expansion of Nepal's global footprint.
Yeah, like the physical barriers are dropping in terms of logistics, right? Just this week, the first direct freight train from the Kolkata port arrived in Biratnagar.
Which completely bypasses the old slow transit nightmares of unloading and reloading cargo at the border.
Right.
That direct line is expected to cut transit costs for importers and exporters by 20 to 30%.
That's huge.
It's a massive efficiency gain that directly lowers the cost of goods for everyday people.
And it's not just goods moving across borders seamlessly. It's the culture and the community organizing, too. The sources highlighted the massive scale of diaspora events this week.
Like the Nepal Festival in Tokyo.
Yes. It completely took over Odaiba's Shiokazi Park, drawing huge crowds. You've also got the Miss Nepal North America finale happening in Washington, D.C.
And it's really fascinating to see how the diaspora is building infrastructure abroad, too.
What do you mean by that?
Well, alongside the cultural events, we are seeing highly practical community hubs emerge. For example, a platform called Belayat.uk.
Oh, right, for the UK.
Yeah, it has become an essential classifieds resource for Nepalese living in the UK, connecting the community with jobs, housing, local Nepali businesses.
It's just a great community tool.
Exactly. It shows a level of digital and social organization that makes the diaspora an even more cohesive force.
Speaking of making a mark globally, we have to talk about the sports footprint, because there's this wild paradox in the cricket news this week.
The men's national team had a very rough week on the pitch in Utrecht.
It was brutal. I mean, they were bowled out for 157, losing to Namibia. Then they faced the Netherlands, and the Dutch captain, Scott Edwards, hit 61 not out to seal the chase. Just a tough series of immediate losses.
But the paradox is that while they were losing the battles in the Netherlands, they actually won the overarching war in Edinburgh.
Because the International Cricket Council granted Nepal direct entry into the 16-team global qualifier for the 2028 T20 World Cup.
Which means they get to completely skip the grueling regional qualifying grind.
That is massive.
And the parallel here is really striking. You know, just like the new freight train arriving in Biratnagar bypasses the old logistical hurdles, Nepal's rising standing in world cricket allows them to bypass the traditional regional barriers.
They are stepping directly onto the global stage in both sports and trade.
The country is connecting to the wider world faster and more directly than ever before.
We've covered an incredible amount of ground today. I really want to thank you, the listener, for joining us on this deep dive through a week of truly profound transitions.
It's been a lot to cover.
Yeah, we've gone from the tense halls of the special court in Kathmandu to the roaring monsoon rivers powering a new economy. We traveled from the vibrant cultural festivals in Tokyo to the dusty roads walked by the marchers from Janakpur. It is a country in deep structural motion.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive.
Go for it.
We have seen how Nepal is physically wiring itself into the regional power grid through its booming hydropower exports, pivoting away from its reliance on exporting human labor.
Right.
And we have seen how it is legally attempting to wire its 3 million-strong diaspora into its democracy through the proposed overseas voting rights.
Two massive structural wires being connected simultaneously.
Exactly. So the question for you to consider is this. As these new connections power up, will the ongoing political instability, the kind that spooks foreign investors and stalls the Constitution, prevent these structural shifts from taking hold? Or are the macroeconomic fundamentals of renewable energy and global diaspora integration simply too strong to be derailed by the noise in the political kitchen?
That is the million-dollar question. You will just have to keep watching the numbers, because the true story of Nepal's future is hiding right there in the data. And to keep tracking that data, and to read the full newsletter this deep dive was based on, be sure to visit nepalidiaspora.net for the latest updates and resources. Thanks for diving deep with us.